I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Cottage Grove Friends of Democracy. We wish to welcome you to our second Candlelight Vigil. Light up the night for justice. We come here tonight out of a reverent place of love. Love for ourselves, love for our democracy, and love for our community. We ask that all participants, no matter how angry you are, participate using your freedom of speech with dignity, respect, and an open heart and mind for change. Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad we're all here. Our first speaker, Dr. Josh Fattal. He has a PhD in history with an emphasis on U.S. empire, which we're trying to take down, the Middle East, and social movements. He spent 2 years as a hostage in an Iranian prison and is a survivor of the torture of solitary confinement. Negotiations for his release in 2011 led to the Iran deal with the United States a few years later. Josh works as the executive director of the Center for Rural Livelihoods, a local nonprofit that works to build a movement for ecological and social change. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I'm going to give a little bit of history about Iran, as I was asked about, and also just a little bit of history of Iran and the global order and where we are in putting this in historical context, perhaps a little bit. I think it's important to see Iran as a bellwether through history. Earlier in the 20th century, they were considered an informal colony of Britain. And that was while Britain had many formal colonies, and they were moving towards informal colonies. So they were ahead of the curve, is what I'm saying. When the Cold War started, they were one of the first places in which the United States and the Soviet Union were in contest in the late 40s. They were contesting over who would control Iran. And in the early 50s, amidst a global uprising against the color line that happened in the United States with the Black Freedom Movement, the American Indian Movement, it happened in Africa with decolonization, it happened in Asia in the fights against French and British and American imperialism. Iran was at the forefront of that. In 1953, they voted in progressive parliamentarians who were pushing back against corporate control of their oil. And when they did that, they faced one of the first U.S. CIA coups after the newly formed CIA was created. And the U.S. CIA worked with Britain to overthrow the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran in 1953. The discontent in Iran only festered and got worse, and the people rose up again in the 70s and created a revolution in 1977. Unfortunately, the faction that took control of that revolution was the theocratic Ayatollahs and the Islamic Revolution of Iran. But still, if we just zoom out to my main point, that they were at the forefront, because in the 80s, we would see, from that time on, religious, radically right-wing movements taking over increasingly in the United States with the Christian majorities, and then also in Israel, where Jewish supremacy took an even sharper turn, and then in India with Hindu nationalism started becoming more and more powerful, as even till today. But in 2009, Iran again was at the forefront with the people's movements pushing back against the regime. They delegitimated the theocratic regime with a massive protest movement. And that was really the beginning of the 2010s Arab Spring, Occupy movement, seeing our movements as part of this global movement against authoritarianism, both locally, with our local leaders, our national leaders, and also leaders around the world, whether it's Egypt or Iran. And then now here in 2026, we see Iran at the forefront of global history pushing back against the U.S. empire, and this, I believe, will look back on this year as a major decline in the power of the American empire. That can only be seen as a good thing, but this contest makes it so that history right now is wide open. It's not determined. We're seeing a crack in a system in a way that we've never had in my lifetime, and that every action, even if it's 25 people in a small town in Oregon, makes a difference. And this is completely international. What happened in Iran, what I want to say is that these past couple months, if we just look at the deeds and not just the horrific words that have come out, the deeds have led to a great suffering. Thousands of people have died in Iran, Lebanon, and elsewhere. But strategically, the United States has lost this war. And just to give a few examples, the demands have changed. First, the United States wanted to control the Straits of Hormuz. They failed to do that. Before the war, Iran didn't control the Straits of Hormuz, but now they do. Before the war, Trump has said that he wanted to get the uranium and destroy the nuclear. He's failed to do that. They said that they were going to support an uprising of the Kurds, and that's never happened. They said that they were going to get regime change from the popular uprising. That never happened. All of the Gulf states that have now been drugged into this war are now reconsidering their relationship to the United States. So this has been, on every metric, a loss for the United States. It was such a catastrophe for human life, and also just, it was a smack in the face to the empire. And what's happening to the U.S. empire, let me say, is it rests on two pillars: terrorizing people and ideologically controlling them. And increasingly, the ideological control is slipping, and all they can rest on is the terror. And we're finding that even that is not working in this case. But I want to end with just speaking to that point I made earlier about how history feels more wide open and how every action counts in a way that is particular to this moment. And just today, if you saw the news, and I heard somebody walking around making sure everyone heard the news, that the people of Hungary defeated the Viktor Orban.
The Trump puppet.
The predecessor of Trump. He was in 2010, and he was the lodestar of right-wing populism around the world, what people are calling disaster nationalism and the fascist upsurge. He was defeated overwhelmingly with 2/3 majority against him. In Mexico, they just announced universal health care for 130 million people.
Yes.
If this has happened by a country that's decided not to go to war and spend its money this way, this is a wide open possibility in front of us, with numbers for Trump tanking because of the resistance in Minneapolis, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. And I want to say this war in Iran is also an extension of the war in Gaza. The genocide that was backed by bipartisan support of the United States government was pushed by Israel, taken up by our lunatic president, and it's extended to the war in Lebanon, the genocide and pogrom, the genocide in Gaza, the pogroms in the West Bank, Israel bombarding, America bombarding Iraq now that's not making the news, the Houthis in Yemen fighting back. This has become a regional conflagration. But to end in this contest, to keep with the momentum that we're seeing today in Hungary, to keep with the momentum that I mentioned in Mexico, we also need to end Zionism. We need to end the push, and we need to end Zionism's number one asset, which is bipartisan support in the United States. So when we push back against that, when we push back against all supremacy, whether it's Jewish supremacy, Christian supremacy, white supremacy, that's when we'll be able to shift this global order in a positive direction. Thank you.
Yeah.